Alright, hello. Today, after my last video did pretty well, we're going to be doing this video where I'm going to be going through my changes to this course. Even though I'm long past it, we're gonna look back and we're gonna try and fix this course to see what it could be uh, if it changes. So firstly, I'm going to reinstate what I said in the last video. So the aim of the course provides a fun challenge for the top grade students in GCSE maths, or just anyone that's interested in maths, I guess. But it's mainly for top grade GCSE maths students. It's also supposed to prepare students for A level. That's probably the main part. It's preparing students for A level maths. And the next part is that it's something I didn't mention in the last video, I don't think, is that it's an easier alternative to the other exam boards, because obviously, like EdXL and OCR both have their own further maths exams, but they're both a lot harder. They're both a lot more like AS maths than a further maths course. It's more just AS stuff with a bit of sequences and series added in. But we're gonna try and make this not the hardest. We're not gonna try and make this the most like loaded content wise. I've tried to minimize the content while maximizing like difficulty and like interest. So some of the stuff in there isn't A level content, but most of it is the stuff that I've said. So the topic list. This is the main thing. Um, Firstly, with differentiation. So this is just similar to the current spec. This is definitely a good thing to go over, but we just add first principles in, which isn't that difficult to integrate in there. Um, Next, we have trig. Again, similar to the current spec, but the completely get trig ratios out of there. We can learn that in A level. It's not very interesting or useful, and they do less. I think they should do less trig identity proof questions in the exam. I'll talk about more of the exam later, but in the exam they love doing. I prefer them to use just like the hidden quadratics with trig, or like solving trig equations and doing trig identity proofs, because a lot of the time they can be very just like randomly like throwing things at the equation, and I think it's just more useful and worthwhile to just make them do trig solving equations. All right, next we have binomial expansion. So there's going to be the current spec, obviously, so a lot of the things is going to be the current spec with stuff added on. Plus n choose r. N choose r is very important in binomial expansion, but they don't add it there because it allows you to expand binomials past like power 6. Um, and then also, because there's a non-calculator paper, half of the exam is half the course is non-calculator, you can do factorial calculations without a calculator, which you don't do in A level. This is like one of the like smaller things that isn't in A level, but it just helps with thinking like about what factorials actually are. So like 8 factorial over 6 factorial is just 8 times 7 or something like that. And then also approximations is just something that's in A level that should be in this topic. There's no reason it shouldn't be because it's really easy. Next, we have factor theorem and tricky division. This is literally the exact same. This is good enough, the spec currently. Next is the big one. So this is replacing MHDs. This is why we have space for this content. Limits. So you might think I was going to do integration, but I think that integration would just be a bit too much, and you might as well just do the other one, the other further maths exam boards. So I proposing this idea of limit. So you have limiting values of sequences, which you already do, but you actually use the limit symbol this time. You could also limit values of sequences to 0 as well, just so that it works either way. It would also help with first principles, which I've added up here. So this like you do limits before you do differentiation. Then questions on like stuff like why is 1 over 0 undefined, but like why is 1 over like x, where x is approaching 0, why is that infinity instead? And then this L'Hopital's rule, this is going to be like the big thing at the end of the topic, where you can learn most of limit and then do differentiation, and then you can learn L'Hopital's rule for doing more complicated limits. And I'm going to talk a bit later about how we're going to like get L'Hopital's rule into actual questions. And next is the final thing, or second last thing, is coordinate geometry, graphs, and functions. So this is kind of like what you do at the start of year 1 in A level. So like it's just stuff that will introduce you. This is the best A level introduction part. So you have circles, which you already do in normal, functions, like just going a bit further into functions, like inverse functions. Even though you do that at GCSE, you just need to be looking at more transformations and stuff like that. Domain and range, which is already in the course. The modulus symbol, modulus graphs, it's not that hard, like conceptually. It's just about like drawing the graphs and seeing how many times it intersects. And then transformations and graph sketching. This is already in GCSE, but just go into it a bit further. Set notation and discriminant, which is stuff that can be learnt quite fast. And then the groups, like the real numbers, the natural numbers, the integers, just like knowing what they are, because it's really useful for A-level again. This is all just A-level based knowledge, like all except maybe modulus. All this stuff is just A-level based knowledge. So if people did this in year 11 as an extra course, so even if they didn't do well in it, and even if they like, failed it, and they want to do A-level maths, they're going to go into A-level maths having some amount of experience with this stuff, and they'll like be able to understand it a lot better than being introduced to them for the first time ever. And then finally, we have all the GCSE pure content. This is just baseline. Again, it's already in the course, so yeah. Next part is going to be, this is the final part, this is about the exams. So firstly, I've said to do the same format where there's like one calculator, one non-calculator, but I would up the time to 2 hours instead of 1 hour and 45, because you want to give time for more problem-solving questions, and there's also another reason that I'm going to explain at the end. So secondly, this is the main thing that I'm trying to do. This, lowering the grade boundaries, like, yeah, people doing the course might hate me for this, but this should be the standard. It should not be the standard to get such a high mark for a 9 in an additional maths course. And like, I don't really care about the normal maths course, because like Edexcel could do whatever they want for that. But for an additional maths course, it should not be this easy. Like, to 70 out of 80 for a 9. So I'm saying like mid-50s realistically maximum should be a 9 in this course, and then like 15 out of 80 on a paper should be a 4. And this is how we actually make the paper harder. So firstly, we're gonna split the paper into 2 sections. So section A is going to be GCSE content only. So it's going to be around like a bit less than half of the marks, but it's going to be obviously harder questions. It's not going to be just normal, like, it's not just going to be the stuff that's like currently in GCSE Further where they just ask some slightly higher level content. It's going to be some actual like difficult like circle theorem stuff, stuff on sequences that you already do, but just kind of going into it a bit further. And then section B will be obviously further maths content only, which will be the rest of the paper, which will actually bring in most of the harder, even the harder, there'll still be very hard questions in this section, but this will include this content. I don't know why it says further maths content only. This is all the content, section B. So section B is going to include everything, and it's going to have all the difficult questions. So like all the grade like 6+ questions, 7+ questions. Oh god. Anyway, so and this is actually something I came up with that I was pretty happy with. If we should make like 40 to 50 out of 80 of the marks in each paper, like split across section A and B evenly, make them a show that question, because show that questions really do, it allows us to put even harder questions in, and keeping the grade boundaries a little bit lower, like not making the grade boundaries go down to like 40 out of 80 for a 9, which would be ridiculously low. Because you have show that question, so if someone gets a question wrong, if someone's aiming for a high grade and they see they've got a question wrong, they know they've got it wrong, so they're going to have to go back to it. And that's where this time helps a lot, because you're going to be able to see that you've got the answer wrong and go back and try new things for the question. And here's some ideas for questions I think I've wrote along. Oh no, I haven't. I've separated it. So sketching modulus graphs, sketching circles, and then solving simultaneous equations with them. They could do that for a harder question in section B. Hidden quadratics with trig, I think that they do that quite well now. So they should keep that. Same with optimization. They should keep doing that a lot, since that comes up in A level. Circle theorem questions, like the style they're currently in with GCSE Further, where I don't really know how to explain it, but they use trig a lot. They use trig and circle theorems in the same questions, which doesn't really happen as much in normal GCSE. And I think they should keep these in like the middle of section A. This would be I think is a good idea. And factorial division, solving equations with n choose r, non-calculator. I've already explained stuff like this. So like you could say, because the n choose r is going to be something you have to learn the formula, or not learn, but be familiar with for the new course. So you're going to be able to solve equations like you say n choose 5 equals 42, what is n, or something like that. Or maybe that's a bit too difficult, but my point still stands. And the L'Hopital questions. So like, for example, you could tell them in the question that a derivative that they haven't learnt yet, and then make them use that derivative to solve a limit with L'Hopital's rule, or just do it like a there'll be a polynomial numerator and a polynomial denominator, and they'll both like cancel to make 0 over 0, and then you have to differentiate it to both sides to get the required limit. Right, we're closing off now. The formula sheet, just add everything. Like this isn't. There's no point in making them remember stuff like this. They're gonna either have to do that in A level, or because this is just helping them familiarize with it. Especially because this stuff's already on. I mean, L'Hopital isn't in the formula book, but for A level, but it's not like it's really hard to remember. But this stuff's in the first principles in the formula book, NCR's in the formula book, so just that's why I make them remember it. And then lastly, I've said that so these changes, so the time, the grade boundary, the show that questions, the formula sheet, it all tries to maximize mathematical ability over random errors and accuracy, because I think random errors and accuracy is stuff that should be prioritized on like actual GCSE maths or A level maths, like the base qualifications, and that's why they've increased the boundaries in both of those, because they want accuracy to be like a forefront of those courses. But when you're doing an additional maths paper, as I explained earlier, it should just be more mathematical ability and problem solving more than accuracy. So yeah, that is my TED Talk. I'll see you next time.